Hello, everyone. I'm guessing you might be wondering why I have with me here a very large jar of intestinal roundworms. Although I am at a TED conference, so maybe you all are used to everything. I have to admit that I've been getting quite an embarrassing reputation lately. Since I started as CEO of the End Fund about 4 years ago, and we work on neglected tropical diseases, I've been getting a reputation for talking about worms a lot and sort of everywhere. At breakfast meetings, at dinner parties, on airplanes, next to people, next to trains. Oftentimes I have a small jar of worms, not this big, but a couple worms in it, and I'll pull them out and point to people and say, do you know this is what is living inside the bellies of over 1 billion people on our planet? This jar here represents the number of worms in the belly of a child with a moderate intestinal worm infection. This is 200 worms. It could be 300, 400, 1,000. And if you put these end to end, because a roundworm is about 10 inches long, it would go from the ground all the way up past 16-story building. It's pretty shocking. I think I'm going to set them down. But what I found when I'm talking around the world about worms is that it's not that it's just embarrassing or gross, but the worms have a story to tell. There really are 1 billion people living with severe intestinal worm infections. And even though sometimes I recently was in Dubai and knocked on one of our investors' door, and her son, 8-year-old son, came to the door and said, oh, Mom, ran in the house, and he said, Mom, the worm lady's here. I was like, really, this is starting to get too far. But when you look at a jar of worms like that, it's impossible not to see that with a child with this many worms in their belly is not able to live a healthy, productive, full life. And it turns out it's not only just bad for our people's health, it's bad for the economy and education as well. It's been shown that just deworming children can reduce school absenteeism by up to 30%. And adults who in developing countries have been dewormed as adults end up making a lot higher wages. And I'm not just here today to regale you about worm stories or this wormy world, but actually I have an amazing story and inspiring message to share. There is a global movement afoot to end the neglected tropical diseases and the suffering caused by them. Really, these 5 key diseases that affect over 1.5 billion lives globally. And it's not just intestinal worms, but it's schistosomiasis that kills about 200,000 people per year, or blinding trachoma that's causing the most painful type of blinding for millions of people that it doesn't need to, and elephantiasis, which if you've seen pictures know how stigmatizing and painful that can be. These are diseases that have been around for a long time. You see them written about in the Old Testament. You go back and look on Egyptian tombs and there are pictures etched on the walls. But it's now that you see people coming together as a global coalition saying we have a plan, we have the tools, there are medicines available, there are prevention messages that are clear. Governments have aligned around national plans to ensure that they actually can implement the strategy to eliminate these diseases. And I've seen hundreds of community health workers, NGOs and organizations come together to implement this plan. It's actually not just hundreds of community health workers. We, at the End Fund, we're just looking in the last 4 years, we've helped train over 200,000 community health workers in some of the most rural areas in the world to see an end of these diseases. And while I am incredibly excited, I'm also not naive. Ending diseases that affect 1 billion people is no small task. But what I think inspires me and so many that are involved in this work is the enormity of the task. It is bigger than any one of us. It's bigger than one NGO, one government, one ministry. It's something that you have to leave your egos and your logos aside. You have to humble yourself to a higher cause. And amazingly, if you look at this little girl here, I met her outside of Nairobi, Kenya recently. It was part of a deworming day at her school. Just a few years ago, they didn't have a school-based deworming program in Kenya, but after the government saw the evidence of how much good it could do, they said, okay, let's start. a few schools, a few districts. This particular day, all the children were lined up in the schoolyard, washing their hands, getting measured, taking medicines for schistosomiasis and intestinal worms. And it was incredible. The principals and the teachers were saying, listen, even in the few years that we've had this program, you can see that kids are healthier. There's less school absenteeism. They're less anemic, so they're able to focus better in school. And that was just one school. In that particular week, that was going on in thousands of schools across Kenya, and over 6 million kids got treatment. A few years ago, we helped launch a program in Ethiopia, where now, this year, over 20 million kids will be served. And in India, in one single day, they launched a National Deworming Day, over 200 million kids got helped. And we just got the data in from 2015, and as a global coalition of all of these governments and organizations working toward a common goal, we were able to treat almost 1 billion people for the diseases. For me, I think it's something that's like one of the best kept good news secrets out there. It's an example of global collaboration that I think a lot of us could learn from. We're not done. There's a lot of room for others to engage. And I think what I want to ask, in addition to sharing this good news story, please not applaud for me, but if you could close your eyes for a moment and imagine if you were a community health worker working in a rural village where in order to get treatment you were in a place with no electricity, no water, no roads, most people that don't have shoes, and you are making sure to go door to door, school to school, clinic to clinic, and realize we have a force, an army of these rural community health workers that are making treatment happen for this almost billion people every year. And please give the applaud to them.